The last couple of weeks, there's been like nasty news articles about me. And I'm like wondering, what the hell? Why are they coming after me with all the other shit, all the other things going on, in the country and the world? They got these, like a Washington Post, New York Times articles, right? So, and I'm going to read something. And in the case of Flynn, it would soon come out that he had taken, quote, dirty money, unquote. And I'm thinking to myself, really? Seriously? Okay, where is it? What is it? Because the one thing, as I just said earlier, that they also understand is I'm not somebody that has bought and paid for. I don't work for a country. I don't work for some, I do work. I do bust my ass to earn, the kind of living that I have.
You work for America. Everybody knows.
Exactly,
if you were to NASCAR, there's one decal on it, and it's the American flag.
Yeah, I didn't spend over 33 years of my life in the military, 5 of those years in direct combat operations, and all these other assholes, excuse my Irish, that are out there that have no friggin' idea, these digital warriors, that are down in their basements. I know that there's good digital soldiers. There are influencers out there that are working hard and they're trying to expose the right things, but there's also these idiots out there that say things and they don't have a clue what they're saying. So, but that bothers me less than what I believe President Donald J. Trump needs to do going forward. And I am going to talk about that. I'm reading from a report that I got from a very good source, a source that I would describe as A1. And anybody that's ever served in the military in the intelligence business, when you say you've got an A1 source, that means you have a bulletproof source of information, right? They're going to dig up dirt on my wife, right? On my wife, that she had relationships while I was deployed overseas. I showed this to my wife. She was livid. As I'm livid. Come on. This is unbelievable. But this is the kind of bullshit that we are dealing with, that I'm dealing with, because why? Not because I'm over the target. It's because people know that my voice, and thank you to any audience out there for allowing me to have the voice and the platform that I do have, because otherwise, what am I going to do? Go off into the sunset? Bullshit. This is not how I was designed. I was not raised like
serious. Why are you sharing this information now, Patrick? As we're looking at Venezuela and we're talking about our rigged elections, it seems to me that you feel that this is an important part of you that you need to let the people know. Why?
I've danced around long enough and it's not working. And the regret of my life is that I spent the first Trump term trying to dance around within my constraints. Buffett said, Patrick, when I went to see him, he was like my rabbi. He said, Patrick, just go on television and tell everything. And I just said I couldn't do that. But I went and told enough, trying to shape. And I've had enough. We're having insurrection. We have an insurrection going on. People calling, these people calling, and don't you hate how that they say, well, we're not saying disobey Trump. We're just saying that if he gives you illegal orders, which theoretically, then it's time for you to disobey Trump. So I want to tell people in the military who I know watch your show that theoretically, if you have officers, generals or colonels who try to get you to take part in a color revolution, please kill them for us citizens. Just shoot them in the face. We'll appreciate it, theoretically.
Well, better laid plans seem to fail some days. It is January 2nd, folks, and we're still in the war zone here on Steel News. A little rusty. We had a couple of days off, but you know what? It is a new dawn of a new day, and the war zone continues. I don't know if you're paying attention to what's happening around, but people are lighting it up on social media right now. And today, on the heels of basically some very serious, shocking revelations that were dropped on all of us here in America with General Flynn's emergency broadcast on Alex Jones this past Friday, and as many across America and the world are drowning in what we call salacious headlines, I want to acknowledge something that has been deliberately erased from public record. For years now, Emerald Robinson has done what very few journalists in America were willing to do. She followed the evidence on election integrity. Isn't that why we're stuck in this horrible situation? We watch our republic just disintegrate before our eyes. We don't even have a republic. They don't even use the Constitution. But with Emerald, when it came down with professional, legal, and personal consequences, she didn't back down. She didn't just report on opinions. She reported patterns. She documented how voting machine companies like Smartmatic and Dominion responded to scrutiny, not by opening their systems to transparency. We all know about that. They sued people into an oblivion, but they did this because they did unleash multi-billion-dollar defamation lawsuits. Defamation. Were they really arguing on the merits of what people were saying, or were they just saying, oh, you're being mean to me? That's right, because these lawsuits, they were designed to silence journalists, networks, and anyone who dared to ask questions. She reported that when Smartmatic filed a $2.7 billion lawsuit against Fox News, Lou Dobbs, the highest rated host on Fox Business, yeah, that's right. You know how he was rewarded? He was taken off air the very next day. So Emerald showed us how almost overnight discussing election fraud became career-ending offenses. She was there inside the White House briefing room asking direct questions about China, critical infrastructure, and America's power grid at a time when others were too afraid to speak. And when the Biden administration took power, she reported how discussions of election integrity were systematically labeled disinformation. They weren't debated. They weren't investigated. They were slammed and shut down. She also brought forward reporting that few major outlets would even touch foreign election technology tied to Venezuela and Serbia. Oh my, she actually talked about it. Whistleblowers who came forward and were ignored. She talked to them. Technical briefings explaining multiple methods of machine-based election manipulation that were delivered to senators, members of Congress, and federal agencies. And zip, zero, zilcho, nada was done. According to her sources, those who tried to expose these systems were warned to flee Washington, not because they were wrong, but because they were dangerous to powerful interests. Emerald reported on international data routing, foreign hosted election infrastructure, and the disturbing possibility that America's election systems were not as sovereign or as secure as the public was told. And for that work, she wasn't rewarded. She was targeted. She was named as a witness in a major defamation case, multiple defamation cases. She was pushed out of corporate media. And like many truth tellers before her, she continued anyway. This isn't activism, folks. This isn't what I'm doing, just activism. We're actually doing journalism. And yeah, sometimes it requires a little activism. You got to dig your heels and you got to confront the liars. Emerald Robinson, it's an honor to welcome you to Steel News. Thank you so much for joining me here today and being a part of all of this. You have done some incredible work over the years, and it's an honor truly to have you here. And I've been a guest on your show, so you're not afraid to deal with truth tellers. So thanks. How does it feel to be January 2nd on the heels of all this?
You know, I'm looking at the fact that we're in 2026, and unfortunately, we still have a lot of the same problems we had 6 years ago, right?
Yeah.
But I am hopeful this year. And as you were talking about my reporting, and there are others like yourself who refuse to give in and reported on the truth. It's sad that that must be called activism, right? But that's the state of journalism. We're actually just doing journalism. We're just doing our job, and we refuse to stop following the trail that was laid before us. It was obvious. It's not even that you can say that I'm special. I just refuse to give in to the pressure. That shouldn't be activism. It's just where journalism should be. But journalism has died, as I know you talk about all the time.
Yeah.
But I'm a little bit encouraged on this January 2nd in 2026, because while I took a break, I laughed to my husband. I said, of course, it's while I'm taking a break that everyone starts talking about election fraud, but it was great to see. You had the president.
You teed it up. So you did your job. And you know what? You can go in the backseat of the car and take a ride, Emerald. It's okay.
It was nice. It was nice.
All right, so I want to talk about this because you put out a blistering thread. When did you actually realize that election integrity wasn't just about fraud, but it was about silencing anyone who asked questions?
November 4th, 2020. It became obvious immediately. We started getting shut down on Facebook probably first. It took about a month before the pressure came into the Newsmax organization, where it was, you realize at a corporate level, you were going to be silenced.
Right.
But we'd already started getting shadow banned on then Twitter. Facebook pretty much completely shut me down from that point on. It got worse, of course, when we started covering the COVID jabs in detail and the ingredients in the jabs and the substance there. And that's still something you're not allowed to talk about, right? And in 2026, you're not allowed to talk about how the jabs continue to kill people, how it's destroyed our military readiness, et cetera. But it became pretty obvious that you were not supposed to talk about election fraud. And I'll be honest, up to the 2020 election, the mail-in ballots were on my radar. I was very concerned about that based on what some people like Stacey Abrams had said, starting in the spring of 2020, that there would be a red mirage. Remember, they started using that buzz phrase that was everywhere. So
they were programming us.
Yeah, they were letting you know what they were going to do, but the machines were not on my radar. I had not seen the reporting by my former colleague, the great Lou Dobbs, who didn't start talking about it in 2020. He started talking about it in 2006, Smartmatic and the vulnerabilities there.
Yeah.
So there had been prior reporting, but all of a sudden it was taboo. It was a conspiracy theory, though in 2018, Politico and NBC had ran multiple articles about the acquisition of Dominion machines in Georgia and how concerned they were about it and how it was affecting the governor's race down there, as they were rooting for Stacey Abrams, right? And they were saying that Brian Kemp was stealing it. So all of a sudden you saw this change in the rules as to what could be discussed. And I realized this is something major. And then I started looking at the past reporting and then the history of voting, electronic voting machines and electronic voting software in our country. And I realized, oh my goodness, our elections have been rigged beyond dead voters, which we knew they did. Democrats like to use, beyond the mail-in ballots and fake ballots. It had been rigged at such a cyber level for so long. And then from there, it just got worse with the defamation cases. Obviously, I was listed as a witness. You know, it was interesting. Unlike a couple other journalists, they never listed me as a defendant. I don't know why. I
was listed and quoted and footnoted in Burns' lawsuit, Lindell's, and a few others, because people came on my show that said Steel Truth was reporting with so-and-so, Lindell or whoever, that, Dominion was flipping votes, right? And so they had me cited. I'm surprised I didn't get called as a witness either.
I think it's because they were afraid of the discovery process if you're actually listed as a defendant, when you're someone who seeks to tell the truth or do actual journalism. That's all I could figure. Now, I still had legal bills. I couldn't trust Newsmax's lawyers. It was obvious to me from day one when they started asking me questions. I realized they're not trying to defend the reporting of Newsmax. They're not trying to defend journalistic freedom or integrity. They're looking to settle this in a way that is beneficial to the voting machine companies. And you know what I did, Ann? I went out and got my own attorney. So it still cost me a lot of money. I don't regret it, because I wasn't going to go along with the narrative that they were spinning. And it was obvious what they were trying to do. But it still cost me a lot of money. But I also learned a lot through the process. It was very interesting, particularly in my Dominion deposition. They would ask me these questions and I would come back with, well, where did you hear that? Sources within the government. And per the email you have in discovery from a high-level DHS official that tells me Chris Krebs, the former CISA director, had no authority, none whatsoever, to say this is the most secure election in history. And they told me on the record, they didn't even look at domestic issues, right? They didn't look at the machines really at all.
So let me ask you something, Emerald, because when it comes to machines, it comes to mail-in ballots, you and I know probably all the election integrity gurus out there from coast to coast. And I have to say, from where I'm sitting, they've all done incredible work. You and I both had a lot of people that are on the spook side of the equation that don't want their incredible work to see the light of day. And they'll come around and try and paint a narrative. And I'm the first to say I've been victim of it. I've had people into my orbit early on in 2017 and 18 that I didn't know, what was really, I didn't know what was what. I was just, trying to tell the truth and talk to anybody. And of course, they use reputation management of others and the fact that they knew other people that had good reputations to disguise what their true agenda was, right? Setups, all this kind of stuff. Now, I want to talk briefly about the cyber stuff because you and Patrick Byrne have unveiled the Serbia story, the Venezuela story, how Dominion was, actually being manipulated. You've got the Serbian, quote, headquarters where whistleblowers have come forward, people that worked in the Serbian parliament and have been interviewed as other whistleblowers out of Serbia. There's the whistleblowers out of Venezuela that worked for Maduro and for Smartmatic. And they were, challenged with run the operation. We'll make sure we execute it up to and including Tren de Aragua, coming into our borders, as Michael Yan and we reported on, and this entire operation. So when it comes to the idea of Dominion and changing votes, this is where these defamation lawsuits came from. And there were those that said, it was Dennis Montgomery that, could say that Dominion was changing votes and we have the evidence and all this stuff. What actually became of all of that? Because the stories we're getting out of Serbia now, in my opinion, don't exactly match up with the original story that we were being told. Do you know which is actually accurate?
Well, based on the whistleblowers that I spoke to, and based on discovery that I've seen in other lawsuits, the Smartmatic in Venezuela, right, is sort of the hub, right. The controller. They lead the election software, but the actual flipping is happening in Serbia. And it's speaking to these stories, right? Remember there was the one story about the German office or the German hub that got, attacked or raided. Yeah. Seidel was raided and all this this is during 2020 and 2021, early 2021. And I actually asked Sidney Powell about that during an RNC press conference, because that's something that former Representative Louis Gohmert had said on Newsmax, actually. So, I'd asked her about it because she was one of the lead attorneys on this during the time. There were a lot of narratives. I've never been able, there were people who say that didn't happen, there were a lot of narratives out there. What they do, and you spoke to these kind of people, will always come to people like you and I with information and try to say, this is how it was. And there's always enough truth in there, right? So you have to try to work your way through it. There's enough truth in there to make it plausible and believable, and it fits with a certain set of what certain truths you already know, but it is meant to mislead you, to discredit you, to move you in a different direction. Now, after looking at discovery and talking to the Venezuelan whistleblowers, plus a whistleblower from the NSA, from our own IC, and a couple other cybersecurity professionals in the electronic voting sector, the software from Venezuela, which is in basically every machine. It doesn't matter what company we're talking about. They use that basic DNA as their software. Mm-hmm. But particularly with Dominion, they had an office in Belgrade, Serbia. There's not just the whistleblowers that are the Venezuelan whistleblowers that worked for Smartmatic that confirmed this. There's also email chains, right, back and forth, and the discovery in different defamation cases. As Sheriff Darleaf in Berry County, Michigan, I'm sure you've talked about his revelations on this show. He's released a lot of that information, right? He's even released the emails that show the Serbian connection. The data is routed there. They can set up a virtual machine into the electronic voting system and flip the votes, right? And then disappear the machine,
right? Like
it doesn't happen. Now, how does China factor into this? Because, we were told that there was Chinese interference in the 2020 election, and there absolutely were. Well, the servers in Serbia are Huawei servers. There's strong connections and emails between Chinese officials, high-level CCP officials, and the Serbian employees talking about the U.S. elections. So China factors into this as they make certain decisions on who they'd like to see in office. And you have one guy named Ronald Morales who worked for Smartmatic Sequoia. Remember, because Smartmatic acquired Sequoia, who then was acquired by Dominion. Right. And then he worked for Dominion. And there's travel records of him going between Venezuela, Serbia, and China. So that appears to be the nexus that, based on my research and my conversations, of really how they flip the votes as it relates to Dominion.
Okay. So, because, Mike Lindell, if I recall correctly, got sued into an oblivion, as did many others, over saying that, Dominion was flipping votes. And at the end of the day, when I read his original lawsuit, I was looking at some of the information that he had used and was presented in the lawsuit by Dominion that claims that he used this information, and it came from other people. It was coming from Mary Fanning. It was coming from Mary Fanning saying it was Dennis Montgomery, et cetera, et cetera. And I wonder, do you think that there were some red herrings in there to set Mike up in some aspects at all? Not because he was wrong, not because they weren't changing votes, but the origin of how these votes
because he was directionally right.
Was that the psyop that was built into that story of truth?
I don't know, because I've never spoken to those individuals. And I know that based on what Mike said, he is definitely directionally right. And he was over target. And there was no way, there's enough evidence that he should not have been sued for, the case should have been dropped. He should have been sued for defamation. And if actual evidence was allowed in, he should have won at trial. And especially with the recent Eric Coomer case, which turned out good in that it didn't. They weren't allowed to hold MyPillow responsible, right? Correct. The organization, but Mike Lindell, of course, was still held responsible for defamation in an obvious bad actor's case. Was it meant to throw? I can't say for sure on that.
Okay, fair enough. I just wondered, because if it was their data and they were the ones reporting it, why is Mike Lindell getting sued for basically, reposting what somebody else is saying? That's been the case with this whole thing, right? If you look at the Newsmax case, I've read through those filings in detail because I'm mentioned in them more than anyone else, almost, except for Sidney Powell, right? So they mostly sued Newsmax for what Sidney Powell had to say on Newsmax. And they say that Newsmax was responsible and that they should have, I guess, pulled her off air or whatever. And yet we see this on CNN all the time, right? Especially as it related to the Russia hoax. You had Adam Schiff come on there lying every single day about the intelligence that they had on Russiagate, and nothing happens. And that's also, it goes back to, journalistic privilege. And journalistic freedom. That was not allowed in these cases whatsoever. I think, and that I was probably the only journalist in all this that did fight for journalistic privilege, journalistic, freedom. I refused to give over my personal cell phone devices, which is something they fought for. And I most others, including Tucker Carlson, did. They gave over all their devices just willingly, which made no sense. I said, why do they need that? They don't.
My attorney conduct discovery, within the parameters that I felt was allowable, or that I know based on the law, how it should be. What it was a fishing expedition to try to find my sources.
Exactly.
For one thing. And then also try to find information to discredit me, because you saw what they did to Tucker. They took messages that had nothing to do with the case.
Right.
What he might have said about President Trump or Sidney Powell and other notable figures in this, or something not, or statements not even related to the situation at all, and used it to try to discredit Tucker Carlson with his audience, which obviously didn't work because he's got a bigger audience now than he ever had.
That's right.
At Fox. But I saw what they were doing to him. And I knew exactly what they were trying to do to me. And what blew my mind, and was that no one else, even the journalists, seemed to understand that they had this privilege. It's written in the law, and they should fight for it. I know it's expensive. It cost me a lot of money to fight for it. But these lawsuits were an attempt to fish for sources so that they could punish the sources, right? Now, one of my sources was dead at the time, so I could willingly give his name, and that was the great Rich Higgins, who had been hired under the National Security Council, at the National Security Council in the first Trump term under General Mike Flynn.
Yeah, he was a great man.
Amazing American. He put me first onto the Smartmatic. And now that I look back, we knew so much, Ann, in those first 2 weeks. We have a lot more receipts now, but we actually knew enough to do something about it then. And talking with a whistleblower within the intelligence community, had written a lot of the reports on the intelligence behind elections in 2020. We knew enough in the intelligence community. They knew what they were looking at. So they actively went into suppression and cover up mode after Election Day 2020. They knew exactly what we were looking at. And President Trump was talked off of it. He knew, but his personal attorneys around him told him, no, these are crazy people, even though the IC community had the evidence to back it up. But of course, we're withholding it from President Trump.
Speaking of IC community, recently this was revealed on your show.
That's huge. That's two huge bombshells right now. But I can't ignore the third. You just told us that you are CIA, sir. So how would you describe your role with the CIA, which you haven't revealed before?
Well, again, I was telling the truth when I said they frequently was reminded that you have a really non-standard relationship. You have that. It became kind of my mother relationship. I had lots of relationships across the government, but eventually I went from there to by 2010, 2011, Obama, I became something called a tier 1 intelligence asset. And then in 2010, 2011, Obama elevated me to national intelligence asset. I was told I was going to be the ace in the hole for all kinds of, for the real tough situations from 2010, that was after working for Brennan for 4 or 5 years. And then I continued doing all that stuff through 2016. And all this crazy stuff happened that I've told you about, where we set up the Russian hoax. That's why, I've talked around it because I was trying to hide that, but I've told these stories about how I got drawn into setting up the Russian hoax and the Hillary this and that. There was a little bit of fibbing there. I didn't want to explain the whole truth. I was doing that. I didn't just stumble into it. I was their go-to asset. I was the national intelligence asset. First, I got pulled under Brennan in 2006, and then 2011, I got moved into the White House. That's why I got mixed up in the Russian collusion and the Hillary stuff.
And there's actually a docu-series that General Michael Flynn produced. And I can't hear you.
Don't know why that muted. So Patrick admitting he was a CIA asset, how does that reframe 2020 for you and frankly for all of us?
Well, I think you can understand better why he knew early on as to what we were looking at in 2020. But I think that was obvious all along. When Patrick said that on my show, he's now saying the words, but come on now. And he references the docu-series that he's in that General Flynn did. It's actually a great one. It's just a great watch because it's very, very entertaining. It's very well done. And it's a, moment to moment, very thrilling spy series that if it was scripted and made up, it's entertaining. But knowing that, this was Patrick Byrne's life, then it's really, then the docuseries reveals that. And here's what I have to say to that. People say, oh, well, now I can't be trusted. Understand that because we have an extreme lack of trust. Oh, with good reason.
Absolutely.
With our intelligence community.
Yeah.
Go ahead. I was just gonna say, I've been fortunate throughout my years covering first economic policy and then politics in general, that I have met a few Americans, unfortunately not enough. But there have been a few who have worked in the intelligence community as assets or at different levels, let's say in the CIA, who are true American patriots. They're absolutely appalled at what our intelligence community has become, and they think it needs to be burnt down. But let's be honest. It takes those guys to know what was really going on the inside, because many of us, if you're a journalist and you've covered it, you know what to look for. But the average American, just an average American, probably couldn't have had the information readily available that someone like Patrick Byrne, who has worked as a high-level asset for a couple of decades, had. And it took someone like a Gary Berntsen, right, who had been a CIA station chief, to say, this is what we've done in other countries. We had reported on it. There had been station chiefs who sent back reports to Washington over the decades saying, hey, we're seeing budgets being stolen here. Probably 300 eyeballs at a time were looking at this information. So people know this and they just discarded it because they knew what they were doing and they didn't want to talk about it. So we had to have those guys to put the pieces together and get pointed in the right direction. Now, what you have to do is continuously vet that information. And Patrick Byrne will be the first to tell you. Every time Patrick tells me something, he says, don't just trust me. Go ask some of these people or, find other people to ask. And that's what I've done.
That's right.
Spent, almost 6 years now interviewing. I remember in 2020, and I was calling down at the county level in Georgia. I was calling GOP chairmen. I was calling precinct chairs. I was calling clerks. Anyone who would talk to me about what they were seeing. Now, in the initial days right after 2020, one thing they were seeing is that they were coming in and doing changes to the machines, saying that, oh, this is just regular maintenance after an election. And the clerks and the precinct chairs did not believe that was honest. So I've talked to everyone you could possibly talk to at every level. And I know you've talked to a lot of the same people. And over the last year, particularly since Patrick Byrne and Gary Burnson and others started telling me this wild story about 2024, which sounded again like a scripted
spy movie. Yeah.
Thriller on Netflix. And it should be one day. I went and talked to other people. I started calling around. I called a lot of the people who were involved that don't want their name in there, but I knew were around. And some of those people who were mentioned in the story. And I called to say, hey, well, just look at General Flynn the other day. He verified what I said about going to Switzerland and meeting the whistleblowers.
That's right.
And he hadn't publicly addressed that yet.
No.
But I called around and people said, yeah, no, that's true. And of course, I called General Flynn. You know, I called everybody who was involved and anyone who could be in the periphery. I have spent hundreds of hours over the last year. So if you didn't see me reporting on something else, it's because I was literally on the phone day and night checking out this story.
And yet nobody's calling you for the big interviews. No. You're not getting called from Fox. You know, God knows the left isn't going to call you. They're never, I mean, they're just, but again, they're all part of the same weaponized, you know, fourth branch of government apparatus. They're here to make sure that your message isn't getting out. You know, General Flynn went pretty hot on Friday. I loved it. I was simulcasting it on my channel because I just wanted to, you know, help get as much people watching what he had to say. You know, Todd Blanche and Susie Wiles, you know, they seem to be either protection or management of something going on in the White House. And you put this out, which I thought was great. I told you for the last few years, America is now a banana republic. And now we have a final confirmation I was right. And it's the Hill's article on Todd Blanche saying the DOJ won't release full Epstein files. I mean, the issues that we are hearing and seeing with Todd Blanche go far beyond the Epstein files. He seems to be sort of the blockade in the DOJ, and he's, you know, somehow doing the dirty work of what Pam Bondi doesn't want to get her fingernails involved in. What's your take on Blanche?
All roads continue to lead back to Blanche. Doesn't matter whether it's the Epstein files, as I put there, which was, you know, other public source reporting,
right?
But the election indictments. I'm continuously being told indictments are coming and indictments are coming. And I do believe at the time I'm being told that is probably the intentions of other people involved. But by the time they go for a sign off at the top of the DOJ, which is Todd Blanche, because Pam Bondi is largely MIA, unless she needs to come in to account for, you know, to Trump or something, or, you know, she's showing up on Fox. It's about all she does. I hear she's even just hanging out in Florida mostly. She's not even spending most of her time in the DOJ.
I hear the same thing.
I called I've got some good attorney friends there. I called them, how often do you see Bondi around? Never. And they're confirming to me Blanche is the problem. And it's also with the J6ers. Remember, there's still some problems with the J6 community as far as accountability there. Some of them who need full pardons have not received those yet. And then there's also the civil litigation asking for restitution for what our government did to them. Blanche and Bondi, in her absence, are also blocking that. The J6ers, something the president has said needs to happen. So it is leading back to Blanche. Now, you also heard equally disturbing was what Alex Jones had to say in a personal revelation about an interaction with the DOJ and Blanche in that same conversation with General Flynn. I was brokenhearted to hear that they're doing this to General Flynn.
Yeah.
I immediately sent it to my husband. And I said, you know, if you thought that we're going to be okay, because the Trump administration is in, and I'm in the state of Virginia, where the CIA is about to take over my state. Okay. And we see a lot of this political persecutions at the state level thing, Michigan, Arizona, Georgia, right? Because if they can't get it federally, they'll go after people at the state level.
Right.
To hear what they're doing to General Flynn after he's been targeted so much, and this is the Trump administration. I was personally very upset.
So why is he being targeted? Is it just because he's dangerous because of what he knows? I mean, with watching again that episode, and I want your take on this because you know these people better than most. Bongino versus Alex Jones. Is this a theater? Is it a personal feud? What is going on there? Is Bongino going to come back and pick up a podcast? Does he think anybody's going to watch it?
Bongina. I've decided to turn it to the feminine after his absolutely disgusting performance at the FBI. And you know what he's going to do? He's going to come out on his podcast and just say a lot of strong words and act like he's so tough. Well, we learned how tough Bongina really is. And Bongina
permission to recycle. I'm going to use that.
Oh, please do. Let's make it trend. Hashtag Bongina.
I'm going to.
He blocked me early on when I called him out for refusing to cover election fraud. It had come to my attention that he had told people, this is from a very good source, very close to me, that he refused to talk about election fraud on his show. And he would tell people that if that's something they talk about, they're not allowed to talk about it on his show. So I knew going into the FBI, he wasn't going to do anything. If he didn't have enough balls to talk about that on his show, he sure wasn't going to go in there and reform one of the most corrupt, swampiest departments, agencies in our federal government. So is it real between he and Alex? Yeah, I think the more disturbing revelation from Alex was that he was brought into the DOJ to basically try to make him an asset, right, against other America First personalities and figures in the America First movement, essentially saying, hey, we know you got some problems, right? Because the federal government has been going after Alex Jones for a long time, particularly under the Biden regime. And he has had ongoing legal battles. And they essentially, if you listen to Alex, what he said is he was told they could help him out in this area if he would help them out. And he made it sound as if it was in going against other America Firsters.
You're exactly right. Yeah. Flip on everybody else who's standing up and trying to
tell the truth. It's the same thing the Biden regime was doing.
Yeah.
It's no different. So, and as far as, and before we move on, I do want to get to what General Flynn, why target him?
Yeah.
Because look, he was one of the top spooks in our country for a long time. Mm-hmm. General Flynn absolutely knows where the body's buried. He knows exactly how this works. Exactly. And he had a direct line. They were able to cut him off the first term with the Rushgate hoax and neuter him by making him too hot to touch, right, for President Trump. So General Flynn couldn't advise him in the same way. Even if they had pushed him outright, they made sure that President Trump couldn't talk to General Flynn. Right. Wasn't the case the second time around. And General Flynn knows exactly what needs to be done and can tell Donald Trump that if Donald Trump gives him a call. So they have to find another way to keep him from being able to talk directly to Donald Trump, I think.
And I think his emergency broadcast was just that. He's not only talking to President Trump, and I think everything he said on the emergency broadcast, Trump has already heard, but it was really for us to hear. It was for the American people to hear and get very vocal about it, because as you and I both know, we the people are the government. It's very clear in our Constitution. We don't exercise it like we should. But if you inspire people to show up and do their job, i.e. do what you do what I do what a lot of people are trying to do, which is just get people educated and start moving and acting in accordance to self-governing, which we can, perhaps we might fix this situation. But there's one person that's very close to President Trump, and you went all the way there with her on Susie Wiles about this Vanity Fair article. I mean, that was a shocker, and you were pretty vocal about it on December 16th right here, which I love it. Susie Wiles talked with a shit lib reporter 11 times. Trump has an alcoholic personality, and Vance is a conspiracy theorist, and Vaught is a right-wing zealot, and Musk destroying US aid is a bad thing. Yeah, this is what Susie Wiles said to this reporter. What in the actual hell is going on here, Emerald? How does President Trump not know this is what's going on?
It was just a dumb thing to do.
Oh, yeah.
Obviously, she knew she wasn't going to be punished for it. And then she tried to come out there, and they all tried to say they took her words out of context. I don't care
11
if
hours?
you did. You should have been sitting with them anyway.
Exactly.
They hate you. They hate everything about President Trump. They hate everything about America First, but so do a lot of people that are still currently in the Trump administration. Okay. So she should have, and then posing for those pictures, the whole team. I know Susie controls the team. I get it. But at some point, somebody like Rubio or JD Vance. JD wants a political future, right? He wants to be the heir apparent in 2028 and is obviously automatically working towards that goal, already working towards that goal. That was a dumb thing for him to do. And I would tell him that. Why on earth would you agree to sit for this and talk to these obvious bad actors? But then here's the thing. They can say they took it out of context, but then they had the recordings and they played them for other reporters and they have it all on the record. And when you have your gatekeeper and chief of staff sitting with the enemy like that and joking and making fun of your own administration, we got real problems here, folks. And that's just what I'm trying to point out, because a lot of people say, well, I don't really want to have him rolled on because she's such a pessimist. I'm not a pessimist, I'm a realist, because we have to do something about it. And I've made my list on my X of the things that need to get done in 2026. And a lot of that's to deal with our security vulnerabilities, with our infrastructure as it relates to China threats. There's lots of serious issues that we face. And we have to be honest about them. And one thing that I have learned about covering President Trump over the years, Ann, and I'm sure you have too, is that he does listen to the public pressure from the base. He might be headed in the wrong direction. We've seen maybe not as much course correction in the second term as the first term, but for issues this big, if people will get vocal and get upset enough, he will be forced to listen. And that's why General Flynn understands that. But I also know that General Flynn is very careful with what he does. So when he did that emergency broadcast, folks, that means it is a level 10 situation. It is a code red. He is only doing this because he feels that he absolutely has to at this point, because I know he tries not to do statements like that.
It's very rare when you see General Flynn just completely speak off the cuff and, you know, and uses Irish, because he's a seasoned veteran, my goodness. But I think, he understands America has hit the breaking point. And when I've never seen so much discussion for a tax revolt, don't pay your income taxes. Look, when they're sending the money to Somalia, what are we doing? Who are we working for here? I didn't sign up for that. You didn't sign up for that. Nobody signed up for that. In fact, the things that President Trump has made a priority right now, I think a lot of Americans are like, well, that wasn't on my bucket list when I decided to go to the polls and vote for him. I wanted the border closed, which he did. It's closed for the most part, right? It's much better, but they wanted accountability, and we're not seeing it yet. And I think Americans are beyond the breaking point and boiling point with lack of accountability. And then you look at the Kash Patels, the Dan Bonginis, this Pam Bondis, and you wonder, how does Ed Martin even survive in that swamp? How is he doing it on a day-to-day basis?
I think that they have sidelined him so significantly. That's the only reason he's survived, because they've made sure he has no resources and no real power. And I'm sorry to say that. Ed Martin is a true patriot, and I do believe he's fighting for the right things in there. It's just that he's probably getting shut down. Like many others, there's other names you don't know. There are some good people in there that somehow managed to weasel their way into the Trump DOJ. There's a couple really good other people, and everything they do, they just get shut down. So they're trying to do it in small ways and incrementally. But that means they can't be effective as fast as they would want to be. And I'm sure that's what's happening to Ed.
Yeah, it's frustrating. Definitely, it's frustrating, because I think President Trump at this point, it's now January 2nd. We're a year into his first term, or second term, excuse me. And I'm wondering, does he not ask why things aren't moving more expediently here? It's just so much going on in the world, the financial reset that's looming over us right now. We're in the middle of it. That's a whole other conversation I'd love to pick your brain on. But I don't think
people are even aware of that. So I am going to try to go into depth on that on my show next week, because it's very important what's happening. And you can see the drive to digital currency and how it could come about from what we're currently experiencing. People, go ahead and do your research over the weekend and look into the silver market.
Yeah. Oh, it's I've been posting a ton about that right now. And of course, the whole drainage of the short selling, the naked short selling that goes on. I'm going to do a segment after this about it. But it is extraordinary how they have fleeced all of us. So I want to close with this, because I know we've gone over your time limit, and I really appreciate that. You've got to get your show going here in a minute. But when Americans look back on this period, I call it the dumb period or whatever. But what do you think they're going to regret not understanding sooner? And when I say this period, I'm talking, you can go back to COVID, elections, whatever you want to categorize as this period. But what do you think they will not we wish they would have comprehended sooner?
Probably how broken our elections are, because we could have maybe fixed it before we got to this point, right? Before we allowed Dominion into so many battleground states like Georgia. We had no idea, but the signals were there all the way back to 2006. Just not enough people were paying attention. And then you wouldn't have the many other problems we have, is the massive the migration replacement that we've experienced,
Right.
the fraud in Minnesota we're talking about so much. This only is allowed to proliferate because of rigged elections.
That's right. You're absolutely correct. And these rogue agencies that are doing nothing but protecting the quote industries they're supposed to regulate. And Chevron getting overturned was like a speed bump to them. That doesn't mean jack shit,
No.
really. They're just keeping on. And again, the American people suffer. Emerald Robinson, you are a light in a very dark place right now. And your work is outstanding. I encourage everybody, get on over to her X feed. Please follow Emerald Robinson on X. She's at Emerald Robinson. It's right there streaming across the ticker on the bottom. You can't get through a day without looking at her feed, because she's covering the latest, greatest, and she's got some snark that I wish I could hold that candle. I can't carry your snark tool bag, Emerald. I'll try.
You know what? I'm much nicer in person.
You really are. That I can
People
definitely
meet me
attest
and
to,
they're
but this-
you're so
you
mean
are.
on
You're
Twitter."
lovely in person. You're beautiful in person, but your snark on X is absolutely poetry.
Oh, well,
Love
thank you so much. And Ann, I want to thank you for your support over the years. You know, I remember those people who helped me stand to my reporting and stood behind me. And I don't take that for granted. Thank you so much. And to your
Of
audience.
course. It's not hard. You tell the truth. You're doing and when you know what, when you're not 100%, you correct the record, as do I. It's just the way it goes. I never set out to say something untruthful, but if I get
No.
it wrong, or my source manipulated me, as that has happened long ago in the past, and they're still trying, trust me, they're still trying.
Yeah.
I can't believe some of the people that after I've just basically summarily dismissed them, they'll show back up on your Happy New Year. Like, what the hell are you doing reaching out, you scumbag? Get out of here.
Because they're assigned to you. That makes it
Exactly.
obvious.
Yeah, they're assigned. It's like, man, you can't shake these, please. Anyway, Emerald Robinson, thank you so much. Happy New Year.
Happy
and,
New Year.
We'll look forward to your reporting. And I'm looking forward to next week's reporting on the silver market and what you're going to talk about with the financial reset, because it is happening.
It is happening.
All right.
Thanks,
God
Ann.
bless, Emerald. Thank you.
Happy New Year. Bye.
Wow, what a breath of fresh air. She's really quite remarkable. Really, if you need a great read in the morning or anytime during the day, head on over to her X feed. It is blistering. And, you know, she is somebody I really respect and admire and look up to, because, you know, she was in the very mainstream, which today mainstream is really the lame stream. Let's be honest. She's the anchor over at Lindell, and she has her own show, The Absolute Truth. She's got a Substack. She's got it all going on, but frankly, she is incredibly talented. And her X feed is heavily suppressed. So I'd love all of you to right now head on over to her X account and just bang it out, start, following her immediately, put her on notifications, because, this isn't about relitigating the past, right? This is really about understanding why the truth was never allowed to surface. And Emerald is that person that's been lifting the truth to the surface. So what you heard from her, it's not speculation. This isn't a pattern that's being repeated across elections. It's actually institutionalized, right? This is what they're doing. They're using the media and administrations where evidence existed. Warnings have been issued, but the accountability never comes. And this is what we're getting very frustrated with. But this is why you have to keep talking about it. This is about why the system has been refusing to act. We're uncovering all that. And journalists like Emerald, they were silenced through lawsuits, right? Whistleblowers were ignored. They were threatened, perhaps even. And experts who brief lawmakers were then told, no, walk away, right? So Americans, we've been instructed to stop asking questions for the, quote, good of democracy. Well, you know what, folks? Newsflash, if I've said it once, I've said it a million times. America is not a democracy. We're a republic. Democracy is about control, mob rule. And if you want to put it and contextualize about the mob that's in rule, well, it's the wrong mob that's in rule. Election integrity is the foundation of self-government. And when that foundation is compromised, when discussion itself becomes a crime, everything built on top of it becomes illegitimate. So basically what I'm saying is the most dangerous lie that was ever sold to the American people is that nothing can be done. Well, I think history and Emerald are telling us otherwise. They're basically pointing out, she has been pointing out that every system that relies on silence is going to collapse the moment the people refuse to look away. And she's one of the people that simply will not look away. She won't walk away. because, she knows this isn't a left or right issue. She knows it's about truth versus power. So I'm going to take a quick break here. When we come back, I'm going to talk about MMTLP. In fact, I don't know if you can see it. I'm actually wearing a dog tag today from the Zolnick family that sent me this beautiful dog tag. It's about the MMTLP crisis, the fiasco. And I alluded to naked short selling in the ending of this segment with Emerald just a few minutes ago. We're going to talk about that. I'm going to break it down a little bit for you. I'm going to go a little bit unscripted here because I want to touch on this today. It is January 2nd. And when I'm done with this live, I'm actually hanging up the phone and I'm calling the DC Metro Police, who actually has my permit application for the press conference that we want to do live in front of the Securities and Exchange Commission over on F Street in Washington, D.C. F for fraud. How appropriate. Or put any expletive behind that you want. But we're going to get to the bottom of that. So I'll have an update on my X feed about that today because I really want to get that locked in so we can get that on the menu. And anybody that wants to come from the MMTLP community, from GameStop, from Bed Bath & Beyond, from AMC, or any other, Truth Social, TMTG, the Trump Media Technology Group, all of these companies who've been attacked by short sellers, naked short selling, criminals, essentially, we're going to give you all a platform. So stick with me. I'm going to kick this off really with some education on what it looks like to be a naked short seller.
There has been perpetrated upon us the most hideous crime against humanity, and it goes so far back that you can't blame any of the administration because they are not a government. They are the United States Corporation. The U.S. government incorporated as a for-profit commercial enterprise in the Legislative Act of February 21st, 1871, 41st Congress, Session 3, Chapter 62, page 419, and chartered a federal company entitled United States, i.e., United States, aka U.S. Incorporated, a commercial agency originally designated as Washington, D.C., in accordance with the so-called 14th Amendment, which the records indicate was never ratified. The United States government is a foreign corporation with respect to the state. 19 Corpus Juris Secundum 541, location of United States. The United States is located in the District of Columbia. Secretary of the Treasury of Puerto Rico was appointed receiver over the bankrupt United States in the Reorganization Plan number 26 in 1950. Title 5, United States Code, Section 903, Public Law 94-564. The Secretary of the Treasury of Puerto Rico, Title 27, Code of Federal Regulations, Section 251.11. The title, Secretary of the Treasury, is a euphemistic abbreviation of the actual title, Secretary of the Treasury of Puerto Rico. The Internal Revenue Service was incorporated in Delaware, is not a part of the supposed U.S. government, which is but a de facto for-profit corporation masquerading as a government. It operates out of Puerto Rico. This is the IRS. It's not registered to do business in any state, is the bookkeeping and debt collection arm of the Secretary of the Treasury of Puerto Rico. They collect for the International Monetary Fund. Everybody who gets up into the administration, the Congress, the legislation, all the way down to the local level are corporations, private companies. We are their chattel. We are their inventory. They make money off of us, and you don't even know how deep it goes. And I apologize for my passion about this. But when I found this out, it was the only time that I felt hatred for the evil slime who did this to us. In 1871, when the United States became incorporated, they attached our birth certificates to a CUSIP number on the stock exchange, which equals slave trade, and it's done every time a baby is born. There is a bond trust account set up, and they trade us on the stock market, and this is all documented, and I know it's shocking. Some of you are hearing this for the very first time, and you're thinking, oh my God, how could they possibly? They go so far as to trick us that, have you ever been to court and the judge says, do you understand? Don't ever say you do. Say, no, Your Honor, I do not understand. That simple little word doesn't mean what you think it does. You have just given him permission, if you say, yes, I do understand, that you're going to stand under whatever he wants to lay on top of you. The courts are admiralty courts. The judges, the attorneys, all belong to the Bar Association. It's still a little bit vague as to what bar stands for, but we do know the first word is for British. Some people say accredited, some say attorney, and a registry. They do not work for us, we the people. We the people are working for them. We don't need a gold standard. We are the value to the Federal Reserve note. We can give value to our United States currency. The Constitution that they're teaching today, as wonderful as it is to learn about a big portion of it, it's not the correct Constitution. It's actually a second Constitution, and that's the one that they wrote when they went incorporated. In 1933, there was the Emergency Banking Act. You've got the War Powers Act, Trading with Enemies Act, and every year, the United States Corporation, masquerading as our supposed government, which is no more than elected officials like a CEO and the stockholders board for AT&T or Microsoft. So you're not voting for a legislation. You're not voting for a representative, because each and every one of them are bonded under a United States corporation. There's 37,000 subsidiaries of that corporation. Every agency, when you look it up on Dun & Bradstreet, is listed as a corporation. It is a for-profit private company, and we're their inventory. I feel bad knowing that I've been enslaved all this time, and I'm sorry for the people during the civil rights, all the wonderful ones who were already in slavery and they thought they were freed. We've all been in this boat together, and people need to really wake up, and we need to hold these corporate officials' feet to the fire and insist the corporation must be dissolved, the Federal Reserve must be banned from this country, and we must turn our system of judiciary back to a common law. If there's no harm, no loss, there's no crime. And everything else is a way to get you to pay. Even the court systems are hooked up to the CUSIP system. When you get a case number on a court document and you're being charged with something, why do you think they call it a bill or being charged? Because that's exactly what's happening. They set that court number up, and it's attached to the stock exchange too. And from the moment you're arrested or charged, they start trading you on the stock market, swapping you just like they were with the derivatives and the default swaps on the mortgage. And that's a whole nother thing. We all know that's coming out in the mainstream media. Federal Reserve is meeting on November 2nd, the same day as elections. All I can say is wait for the sky to fall, because they know their house of cards is tumbling in on top of them. And if I do nothing but go to my grave, I will see them pay for their evil that they have committed, not only against our nation, but every.
Well, folks, I wanted to play that. I know it was a little long, but you needed to hear the genesis of what has happened to our country and who we are and how we are literally chattel and being monetized. And the fact that today, as Emerald and I were talking, and she mentioned at the end, if we don't fix our elections, we're never going to get our country back. It's true, because we have lost control of the government. The government, we are very much the dog with the tail wagging us, and the tail is our government. We are no longer showing and acting as though we are. And we have got to change our mindset in a big way. We have to understand how they weaponized this entire system. They bastardized our constitutional republic back in the 1800s and took control of us through this corporatocracy and the Bar Association and basically lawyers that have no allegiance to us. They have an allegiance to their profession and, frankly, to the British Crown and to the bankers in London. And aren't they getting spanked right now, which one I know Emerald is going to want to talk about next week as she starts to shift into that discussion, because it is here. The Great Reset is happening. The rest of the world is going through it. And they're, essentially sailing through it. We're the ones that are going to suffer because of the system of oppression in which we've been under. There is a topic that I want to discuss today. It's called naked short selling. And this is where Wall Street brokers like your Fidelities, your E-Trades, your Goldman Sachs, your Schwab, you name the big broker out there, they are all colluding with the agencies like FINRA, the Financial Regulatory Authority, and the Securities and Exchange Commission, known as the SEC. And they're colluding in this fashion. They're using naked short selling. I've got a quick clip on this I want to play for you, because I'll let these guys explain it. And then I'm going to walk you through a company, or actually a series of companies. And I dropped a video about it a few weeks ago, and I've been tweeting about it on X about MMTLP and what happened to this stock issuance. It was supposed to just be a Series A dividend share placeholder. It was never supposed to be put on an exchange for trade. Yet somehow it managed to be placed on an exchange without either CEO who created this dividend share, because these two CEOs merged their companies. That dividend share was removed and, replaced onto an exchange and traded against both CEOs' protest. And of course, nobody at the government would actually stand up and go, oops, sorry, we didn't. They just were like, oh, sorry, it happened. They didn't try and stop it. And what happened after that was nothing short of a massive mass casualty event and crime scene across America and, frankly, across the world, because this impacted 100,000 or more investors, just under 100,000 Americans, and in addition to international investors. So let me just play this clip on naked short selling, because I want to get you up to speed on that, and that'll help paint a better picture about MMTLP.
Monitoring the market for the behavior that indicates, hanky-panky going on in the marketplace.
We now know beyond a shadow of a doubt that Wall Street has stolen $100 trillion from Main Street with naked short selling.
And they said, well, we don't want to have a short squeeze. And I said, look, short squeezes are the way the market disciplines bad behavior. That's exactly what you do want. And otherwise, you're not going to have any effect on this. And, the SEC, it has its constituencies, and they don't include little companies being attacked by criminals. They include the big financial institutions and the big companies, so they didn't do anything.
We, the SEC, are going to turn a blind eye to hedge funds who want to come in and do some manipulative activities, which just means using the fault tolerance to end up selling much more stock, to shorting much more stock than there actually is to short. Right. And they did, and they turned a blind eye.
It's a bigger market now. Maybe you need 10 million in capital to knock this stuff down, but it's a fun game and it's a lucrative game. You can't create yourself an impression that a stock's down, but you do it anyway because the SEC doesn't understand it. What's important when you're in that hedge fund mode is to not do anything remotely truthful, because the truth is so against your view that it's important to create a new truth, to develop a fiction. And this is actually just blatantly illegal.
The SEC has the enforcement capability to look at what people are doing by name in options, derivatives, short sales, and they should go, if someone's doing anything wrong, people are in collusion or people going short and then making a tweet about a bank, they should go after them, and vigorously, and they should be punished to the full extent the law allows it. So.
Which brings us to the gold medal winner, Wall Street itself, with the theft taking place daily on the markets. This is likely to have already cost investors over $9 trillion, dwarfing all the other frauds that have come before it. What is the mechanism by which this robbery is taking place? It's the license for Wall Street to issue shares in companies without their permission and sell them for 100% profit into the market, diluting the company's investors and leaving massive amounts of fake shares in the market through a process called naked short selling. How does the scam work? Short selling is a legal process by which a broker can allow a trader or fund to borrow shares from a company shareholder and then sell these shares on at a higher price, hoping to then buy back at a low price at a future date. Naked short selling is the illegal process by which the broker lends a share without actually having a share to loan, which means they are selling something they don't have. This was made illegal by the SEC in 2008, the same year Wall Street ate one of its own, with the Lehman Brothers collapsing in a record-breaking $619 billion bankruptcy, 5 times the size of WorldCom. And Lehman's CEO, Dick Fuld, blamed naked short selling for driving Lehman's into the ground. And Bloomberg also wrote, the biggest bankruptcy in history might have been avoided if Wall Street had been prevented from practicing one of its dark arts. As Lehman Brothers struggled to survive, as many as 33 million shares in the company were sold and not delivered to buyers on time, according to data compiled by the SEC and Bloomberg. That was more than a 57-fold increase over the prior year's peak. The SEC has linked such so-called fails to deliver to naked short selling, a strategy that can be used to manipulate markets. And despite this massive bankruptcy and then the global financial crisis that followed, exactly 0 people were charged with any crime. And now here we are, 15 years later, with hundreds of thousands of retail investors and now CEOs complaining openly of continuing, ongoing, illegal, rampant naked short selling to manipulate share prices downwards, destroying shareholder value and robbing companies and their investors. Don't even naked short sellers have to cover their positions and eventually find shares to buy to cover their short? No. The stock markets say that all trades must be covered within 2 days, but there are plenty of loopholes to avoid this. First, if a broker does not cover, they file a failure to deliver, or FDD, which buys them a few more months to push the price down and cover later. Secondly, they have ways to fake covering by using off-exchange transactions in dark pools where FINRA and the DTCC do not track all the transactions. And third, they have ways to fake covering by using locates of the same share to cover multiple trades, or to fake the transaction as a long trade instead of a short trade, and a whole bunch of other scams. The result is they can flood a company with sell orders pushing the price down, scaring people into selling their shares at a loss, and then they can cover back at their own time over the next few months, or simply never cover at all and leave fake shares in the market, which can be a multiple sometimes of the company's true shares issued. As Elon Musk tweeted in 2021, you can't sell houses you don't own, you can't sell cars you don't own, but you can sell stock you don't own?
But not once did the SEC go after any of the hedge funds who were nonstop shorting and distorting Tesla. Not once. They would lie flat, the hedge funds would lie flat out on TV for their own gain at the expense of retail investors. Not once, literally 1,000 times. Not once did the SEC pursue them.
I want to say that it is a new day at the SEC. I'm determined that we return to our core mission that Congress set for us more than 90 years ago. The SEC's 3-part mission, as the chairman stated earlier, was enunciated by Congress in the Exchange Act, and that's investor protection, which is vital to our mission, holding accountable those who lie, cheat, and steal.
It violates federal law when you know that a law is being broken. It's Chapter 42, Section 1986. And you choose to do nothing about it, and you have the power and authority to do so. In the eyes of the law, they're guilty.
All right. So that was a really good explainer on naked short selling. And you saw some people that we all know and appreciate now that you heard from Emerald Robinson that Patrick Byrne, of course, came out as a CIA asset, but he's turned and used the information that he learned for good. But he was really the OG when it comes to explaining what was going on Wall Street with the settlement crack, as he would call it. Cracks in the settlement process where trillions of dollars was just disappearing. In fact, it happens all the time. I mean, you got to wonder, how do these people afford all this stuff? Well, they managed to get the money out of the system with some of the, what I would call very illegitimate manipulation tactics of stocks. And it was recently with Devin Nunes, and what is the CEO of Trump Technology and Media Group, Trump Media and Technology Group, TMTG, also of Truth Social. He posted this recently, and this is what came out about naked short selling, and that they've identified this and they have a solution. So I'm going to just
about this. We have people that are essentially whistleblowers that are coming forward. So we're getting people now that are coming out of the woodwork that are beginning to tell us things that I'm like, wow, this looks like something that I should have looked at when I was in Congress. It appears like it's been happening for a long time, but it's something that shouldn't happen in this country. I mean, you shouldn't be, if you're on this reg show list, if there's an irregularity, you can understand if something gets a little out of whack for 1 or 2 or 3 days, but then if the system works properly, everything should be cleaned out quickly. But I think the problem is bigger, and maybe they got so greedy at targeting us that maybe, just maybe, we don't know, but maybe we're going to expose something that's going to be bigger than what most of us imagined. And I think there's probably been a lot of companies over the last decade or so or more that have been hurt by these same tactics. And so, you know, look, I'm hopeful that we're going to continue to work with our allies in Congress. We'll build the case. We'll inform the appropriate authorities. As you know, we've already talked to the NASDAQ. Seems to me like the RICO statute applies here. And that leads me to, you know, the other, you know, we're obviously going down the congressional route right now. But don't forget, there are a lot of state attorney generals that should have an interest in this. If, you know, how much damage has been done to capital formation of other smaller companies that have been hit by this naked short selling or counterfeit shares. My guess is it's going to be a large number. And look, we just might be the poster child. And if this happened to us, we're going to break it out into the open. We're going to make sure that people know about it, and we're going to continue to expose it. So working with Congress, working with other governmental authorities, and also going to work with the state attorney general.
Okay, so Devin Nunes, recently, I'm going to share another screen with you right now. This is a post that I put out just the other day, and it's advising and asking if President Trump ever saw a letter that Devin Nunes put out, and it's regarding what you just heard him talking about. And I want to tie this back to another company. It's MMTLP, which is the stock ticker that was of the birth or the genesis of a reverse merger between Torchlight and Metamaterials, two companies that came together for various benefits that each other provided the other. And they spun out the stock ticker. And the stock ticker was to represent a placeholder as a dividend for a share of a new company that was going to be spun out called Torchbridge and NextBridge Hydrocarbons, NextBridge, excuse me. When NextBridge was spun out, the holders of the MMTLP dividend share were going to get 1 share of NextBridge Hydrocarbon, which was a promising company. And this is where the crime scene started. So I want to just go back a minute and just talk about this from Devin Nunes's perspective, because he did send a letter. And here's a letter that came out where 74 members of Congress signed a letter in support of the 65,000 plus MMTLP victim families, an effort to expose the FINRA U3 halt and an audited broker share count. So let's just go to this right here. And you'll see this letter is from Devin Nunes, the CEO of Trump Media and Technology Group. And he is talking about specifically in, let's see if I can make it a little bit bigger. That's probably helpful for you guys. Hang on a second. He's talking about an urgent matter concerning the potential manipulation of the stock of Trump Media and Technology Group, which trades on the NASDAQ. Okay. But what he was talking about in that clip you saw was that this stock was appearing on the Reg Show threshold list, which basically is a list that tracks, trading activity that's not normal or unlawful, right? And he was talking about the naked short selling, which means people were basically selling stock they didn't own. And brokers, what I'm going to just say Fidelity, but I'm not saying Fidelity was participating, but let's just call it Fidelity. And he's right here. He calls out Citadel, Virtue, GI Execution, and Jane Street Capital as brokers that had an extraordinary volume of DJT shares that were shorted. These brokers were selling stocks that they didn't have. And maybe they were borrowing them from people that were in their brokers, in their broker firms that they were managing accounts for that had the shares, and then reissuing them to somebody else to sell. But the fact of the matter is, it was highly illegal. And the worst part is that FINRA and the SEC are well aware that this goes on all the time. Well, let's tie this back to MMTLP because Devin makes a reference here. He says, I'm attaching an April 18th letter that he sent regarding this matter to Adina Friedman, chair of CEO of NASDAQ, and the other attached letter is signed by 74 members of Congress relating to a separate incident of possible market manipulation, potentially including naked short selling, suggesting that TMTG's experience is not unique. Well, he was referring to MMTLP. And this is the letter that was signed by Congress. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but you can see all these members of Congress, congressional signatures right here. They're well aware of what happened to the MMTLP community. So bringing this all back home, what does this mean? MMTLP and the naked short selling that has gone on has left tens of thousands of investors bankrupt, all their entire accounts wiped to zero, families that ended in divorce, members in the community, including veterans. There was over 200 veterans that were part of the MMTLP community that committed suicide. Not 200, part of that community. College savings accounts gone. This is catastrophic, and this is because you had broker dealers like E-Trade and Schwab and others that sold a stock ticker that was never supposed to trade. One of these broker dealers contacted FINRA and said, hey, we want to trade this ticker symbol, MMTLP. We want to trade it. The CEOs of the two companies that made that ticker symbol had to actually fill out the 211 and go to the forms and fill out the form in order to make that stock trade on a market. They didn't do it. A broker dealer filled out a 211 form they never should have been able to allow to fill out, and got that sucker trading on the over-the-counter exchange in Canada. Well, the OTC market is the wild, wild west. All kinds of shenanigans happen up there. And in this instance, they went to town on this ticker, okay? And they sold millions, if not hundreds of millions of shares short on this ticker. All the while they're selling this, they are pocketing millions and millions of dollars. Here's where the practice went horribly wrong for these criminals. Because when the two CEOs decided to actually square all this up and spin off NextBridge Hydrocarbons, that would require anybody holding a share of MMTLP to get a share of NextBridge Hydrocarbon. That was the original S1 filing that said, hey, you're going to get a 1-for-1. So when they went to file the S1, the broker dealers who were selling the stock short with fictitious shares that didn't even exist realized that. They actually sent an email to the SEC in a panic. And I want to share this with you right now because this is important. They sent this email in a panic to the SEC from a trade organization that represents the broker dealers. The organization is called FIF. The president of it is a gentleman named Howard Meyerson. You see him up here in the red box. These are the people at the SEC he sent emails to. But in this email, they outline these bullet points right here that say, hey, we simply cannot have the SEC allow this S1 filing for NextBridge Hydrocarbons to advance, because if it does, they're asking for all of the shares so they can basically issue the new NextBridge Hydrocarbon share for every single share of MMTLP. They're wanting to have all those shares transferred back to them under their control at the transfer station, which means those shares cannot be held in broker-dealer accounts. So for those people who legitimately own the stock, they would have had their shares transferred back over to NextBridge under the transfer agent, where they would receive a new NextBridge Hydrocarbon share. And for those people who had been selling the stuff that never existed, they would be outed. They're shorts because they couldn't produce a share to transfer. Do you understand what's happening here? So if you read these bullet points, this is an email that is so damning. It is so exculpatorily explosive, proving that the SEC was colluding with financial companies on Wall Street that manage shares for good Americans and others around the world that trade stocks, thinking that their stuff is safe, only to find out their shares were on loan. They were being sold again. It's called rehypothecation. And or the brokers were just selling shares that they didn't even have at all, weren't even on loan. They were just making stuff up. So this is the crux of what is happening to America. This is the silver squeeze you see happening today. America is being sold out and gutted by the wolves of Wall Street that fund so much of this NGO nonsense where we see this going around the world. The cartels are laundering billions and billions of dollars through Wall Street and, making more money on top of money so they can fund these NGOs that are stealing our elections and opening our borders under the name of Catholic charities and Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society and the UN and you name the NGO. This is the big money laundering loop. And oh yeah, there's child trafficking and weapons trafficking and drug trafficking and all kinds of trafficking. That's just part of the fun for these criminals. The fact of the matter is they're using your money, your hard-earned money to fleece it. And there is so much coming forward. I wrote an article today on X. It's in my, if you go to my X feed at Ann Vandersteel, I'll see if I can pull it up for you real quick. I actually wrote an article about the fleecing that's going on. So let me just kind of grab that for you because I want you to see that it's here. Let's see, let me pull it down. Hang on one second. I'm going to share this with you. Okay. This is my X feed articles. The panic behind closed doors. It's right here under my articles tab. So if you go there, the panic behind closed doors, this article is going to walk you through what exactly is happening right now behind the scenes in the central bankers. It's terrifying. We're out of time. They're out of time. And they know it. And this is, in fact, one of the big reasons why you see this massive silver squeeze happening right now, because the banks don't have the juice to back up the squeeze. They don't have the collateral. And, if you start to look at all of these banks that claim they have all these millions of ounces of silver, you have to ask yourself, do they really have it? Because the amount of silver you can get out of the ground on a yearly basis has all of a sudden been eclipsed by banks that were short silver by millions of ounces and got slapped on the wrist for shorting silver, like JP Morgan, who got a $920 million fine back in 2020 from the SEC. Wah, wah, wah. You think $920 million means a hill of beans to those criminals? Absolutely not. But they got that fine because people called them out on shorting silver. In other words, they were selling what's called electronic traded funds, silver ETFs, paper basically. And there was no silver to back up that piece of paper. So when you were buying a quote 1 ounce of silver on paper from JP Morgan, they didn't even have the ounce of silver to back it up. It's called naked selling. They were shorting silver on paper and they were artificially selling that price of silver at a depressed price. Why? Because that kept the spot price, the silver out of the ground, artificially depressed. And what we're supposedly doing was buying silver at those low prices so they could build their coffers up. But what JP Morgan is now being exposed, and Citibank and Bank of America, especially 4.5 billion ounces, is they don't have it, right? They just don't have it. There's no way they can accumulate and turn a short position to a long position at the magnitude that they claim that they've done when you can't get that much silver out of the ground. When COMEX and the LBMA, the big dealers that are, basically for the Western central banking community, they don't have the silver. They're short. These folks like COMEX are telling the people calling in their paper saying, hey, I don't want to have my paper traded anymore. I don't care about making money and that we buy the paper here and sell it here. I don't care about that. I want my physical silver. COMEX is saying, hey, well, you know what? We'll pay you extra money if you just roll that paper contract till March of 2026. Then you can have your silver. It's because they don't got it, folks. They don't have it. So, I'm telling you a lot of the stuff because this is the theme. It's naked short selling across everything. They're lying to us about everything. They're naked short selling our Constitution and our country away. And they've done it by layering corporatocracy after corporatocracy on top of this, U.S. codes, of which have nothing to do with governing we the people. They have nothing to do that remotely smells like the Constitution. This is the crime in progress. So I wanted to build this story by showing you that video of the lady talking. I know it was kind of a tough video, but if you listen to it, she's telling you the truth. You listen to what's going on with naked short selling, you understand how they have fleeced us. And if you read that article on my X feed, I think you're going to be shocked into reality for a lot of people that have 401ks and pensions. Folks, the bell tolls for thee, because the government, in their recent legislation they passed, can now count the 401ks and the IRAs because it is a government, quote, gift to allow you to send money over there tax-free off your income. So you're taxed on less income. They consider that government money and they're putting that towards their balance sheet. Well, what happens when their balance sheet doesn't balance like right now? You think they can't liquidate and take your stuff? They did it in 1934. They came for the gold. I'm just saying, folks, don't trust this government at all. I don't at all. Zero. So anyhow, all right, that is a little bit longer than I wanted to go today, but Emerald was so fantastic. If you missed Emerald Robinson, please go back, watch the beginning. She was absolutely on point. She's done a magnificent job. She's been, I think, a stalwart for truth for a long time. And she doesn't take any punches, and she calls people out. And I appreciate it. So I hope you guys have a great day. It is now Friday, January 2nd, 12:30 almost East Coast time here in South Florida. And I wish you guys a great weekend. And we'll be back next week. I'm going to be doing a lot of traveling over the next 6 months. So don't count on me doing this regularly on every day. I'm not going back to that format. But I will come and talk to you guys when I have something important to convey and some ideas to share, and hope that it helps you all. So you can follow me at annvandersteel.com. You can also follow me on X. You can follow me on Substack, annvandersteel.substack. But everything, all my links are all at annvandersteel.com. So by all means, please do. And if you want to get healthy, right on my ticker below, vandersteelhealth.com is a great way to start the new year. And I hope everybody has a blessed weekend. Thank you so much for your time today. And we will see you next time here on Steel News. Many of you have been asking, where am I getting the energy from? Where is the glow coming from? What's changed with your hair and skin? Well, simply in the last month, I started taking a product, C60 Evo. If you go to c60evo.com/Ann Vandersteel, you too can get radiant energy, mental focus with C60 Evo's ESS 60. What is it? That is pure C60. Get that increased flexibility, immunity, and longevity. And guess what, folks? It's not only for people too. You can get some for your pets. My animals are on it now. And that's right. I'm having trouble keeping up with Vegas, my dog, who I like to go on long walks with in the morning. He is battling back on the heat down here with his C60 Evo as well. Go to c60evo.com/Ann Vandersteel and try their delicious oils that you can eat and add into salads or put on your food. And also incredible facial serums and creams that are making a massive difference in the texture and feel of my skin. c60evo.com/Ann Vandersteel.